From a defabricated solar-powered garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, how to make the best out of flood-inducing torrential rainstorms by trying out that new Yoko Ono Quantum Stretch wetsuit. And now, the podcast host who doesn't need fancy wetsuits because his tight swimwear is already sufficiently eye-catching, Pete Dominic!
Correct again, my friend. More men need to join me in the tight European swimsuit world fashion. And I'm not talking about the high-cut Speedos. I'm talking about they go down the leg a little bit, but they're snug. They're not those board shorts that so many of you insecure men need to be able to be wearing because they're baggy and you're worried about what people are going to see. No, they're comfortable. You don't get sand in your bits and pieces. I'm telling you, get yourself a nice tight suit. You'll be a better man for it. No one? Nobody? Nobody's with me? Okay. All right. Well, joining me today, two very secure men. I've got comedian and political commentator, the host of Tell Me Everything on SiriusXM, the legend John Fugelsang joins me for the first time in a long time, and that conversation starts at about 10 minutes in after I do a very robust news segment for about 10 minutes here. And because yesterday in Iowa, they passed a ban on abortion, I reached out to State Senator Zach Wahls, who has always been a great friend and a very influential and important voice in Iowa politics. I caught up with him during the pro-choice rally that was taking place in the State House yesterday. My conversation with Zach Wahls begins at about 46 minutes in. And you can watch this conversation. I posted it up on youtube.com/standupwithpete yesterday. But first, I do have the news. Day 903 of the Biden presidency, and former president and human bag of tar, Donald Trump, has now asked a federal judge to postpone his trial on charges of illegally retaining classified documents until after the 2024 election. Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis seated a grand jury in Atlanta, which will likely decide whether Trump or his Republican allies should face criminal charges for their efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss in Georgia. The Justice Department is not going to defend Donald Trump from civil liability in the E. Jean Carroll defamation lawsuit against him. And Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville finally condemned white nationalists, saying white nationalists are racists because racism is bad. Oh, and another thing that's real bad is the flooding in Vermont. I heard from our friend Mark Lawler and a couple of others about how terrible it is. The downtown streets of Vermont's capital, Montpelier, have you seen them? They were underwater yesterday after days of slow-moving rainstorms drenched the Northeast, including where I live, in my neck of the woods, as the great Al Roker would say. Rescuers and helicopters and boats headed for remote mountain towns to aid residents trapped in dangerous floodwaters in Vermont. Thinking of all of you up there. And in the South, the heat showing no signs of relenting. Monsoons, which typically offer some respite, lagging behind. So the weather continues to be extreme throughout the United States in different parts and different places, of course. Tens of thousands of Israelis demonstrated across the country after a vote in parliament advanced efforts by the far-right governing coalition to limit judicial oversight of the government. Regulators fined Bank of America $150 million for charging its customer junk fees, creating fake accounts, and withholding credit card perks. What a surprise. Just some of the headlines from the last 24 hours, but just a few clips that I want to play in reference to the big story yesterday, which is Tommy Tuberville, senator from Alabama's super racist comments on CNN last night. I played them yesterday, but today there was a litany of reaction, and I just want to grab a few of the reactions to it. First, let's start with Jake Tapper at CNN, who harken back to an even more racist comment that Tommy Tuberville said. I think this is from last fall when he said it.
Take a listen to what Senator Tuberville said last October at a rally about Democrats.
Some people say, well, they're soft on crime. No, they're not soft on crime. They're pro-crime. They want crime. They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparation because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. Bullshit. They are not owed that.
So, just to be pretty clear here, Senator Tuberville, in addition to falsely saying the Democrats want crime, that's a quote, they want crime, They want reparations. That is the discussion about whether descendants of slaves should be paid reparations. They want reparations because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. That is, Caitlin, the most abjectly racist statement I have heard from a U.S. senator in my life.
Well, that is saying a lot for somebody who's covered politics as long as Jake Tapper has, and for how much racism comes out of actual elected politicians in the Senate, especially, much less the House, obviously. But here now, back to the Senate, is the minority leader. This is, rather, the majority leader. This is Chuck Schumer. He's on the Senate floor where he said this for about 2 minutes about the senator from Alabama.
Last night, given another chance to clear the air, he suggested that no, white nationalists aren't inherently racist, that yes, white nationalism is American, and that the definition of white nationalism is a matter of opinion. It's hard to believe that the senator from Alabama has to be corrected again. The senator from Alabama is wrong, wrong, wrong. The definition of white nationalism is not a matter of opinion. White nationalism, the idea that one race is inherently superior to others, that people of color should be segregated, subjected, and relegated to second-class citizenship is racist down to its rotten core. And for the senator from Alabama to obscure the racist nature of white nationalism is indeed very, very dangerous. His words have power and carry weight with the fringe of his constituency, just the fringe. But if that fringe listens to him, excuse and defend white nationalism, he is fanning the flames of bigotry and intolerance. Last week, the gunman who killed 23 people in El Paso Walmart was sentenced to 90 life terms in prison. He was a self-described white nationalist. The man who murdered 10 people at the Top Supermarket in my home state of New York in Buffalo was a white nationalist. And if those examples aren't clear enough, let's not forget Charlottesville, where neo-fascists, alt-right radicals, and far-right militias paraded through the streets carrying torches and chanted, quote, "Jews will not replace us." Those were white nationalists. This isn't a joke. This is deadly serious stuff. And for a member of the United States Senate to speculate about what white nationalism means as if it's some benign little thought experiment, deeply and terribly disturbing. I urge my Republican colleagues to impress upon the senator from Alabama the destructive impact of his words and urge him to apologize.
All right, that's the Senate Majority Leader. And now here is one of his colleagues, the Senate Minority Leader, someone who rarely has anything good to say about anything, denouncing Tommy Tuberville. This is Mitch McConnell yesterday.
Do you have any concern that you have a member of your conference, Senator Tuberville, who seems to have a hard time denouncing white nationalism, especially as it pertains to white nationalism in the military?
Yeah, white supremacy is simply unacceptable in the military and in our whole country.
Sounds pretty unequivocal from the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell. That's good to hear, good to see on the rare. I mean, not shouldn't be a heavy lift, shouldn't be a courageous thing to do or say for anybody, but it's still good that he said it. All right, well, I didn't get to talk with John Fugelsang about those comments because they happened shortly after we talked, but we had a great conversation about so much more, and that's where I want to go with you now. I always love talking to John. He, of course, is the host of Tell Me Everything on SiriusXM's Progress channel from 9 p.m. to midnight East, and available as a podcast each and every day as well, the highlights of it, and follow him on all the social medias. He's one of the greatest at talking, and I love setting him up, winding him up, and just letting him go. Let him know that you heard him here on the show. Reach out to him on Twitter or Threads or wherever you now live with your social media. He's there. Ladies and gentlemen, John Fugelsang. For joining me and being on the show, John Fugelsang.
Thank you very much for having me, Pete. It's
yes, I want to have you on a lot more often, but you're a very busy man, and but I will ask more often because I love to hear you. And of course, I'm not a subscriber of Sirius. Many of my listeners still are, but I miss hearing you. And I But I'll say this. Let's start with the social media and what's going on, because I've always been a big fan of your writing, and you're so great on Twitter and that short form. And how is it? You have like 500,000 followers. You've always had a huge following. How do you see what's happening with Twitter and all these other social media platforms? Have you signed up for the others?
Yeah, sure. I mean, only a couple, just Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky and Mastodon and Post and Spoutable and Counter Social. Yeah. And LinkedIn, and Threads, and that's it. Like that's
Not
it.
TikTok.
I got a strict 12 apps I have to manage a day limit. I have things to do, Pete. So yeah, I cut it off there.
Once you're done posting on all of those platforms, you have to go to bed, I think.
Pretty much. But I want to know that my joke is completely dated by the time I finish posting it on all.
How do you?
I just got around to a great Buttafuoco joke I put on Spoutable earlier today. Yeah.
How do you see what's happened to Twitter and what Elon Musk has become?
Honestly, I want to know who gave him the $44 billion. I want to know, who was it that actually staked him to destroy the closest thing the world had to a digital public square? Closest thing the world had, where heads of state and celebrities and activists and journalists would all hobnob, and it was all nonsense and ugly. And someone gave him money to gut that. So I just want to know who staked in the bucks, because honestly, people ask me how to explain it. To me, Twitter is like a mob restaurant that's being burned down for insurance money. That's the only thing that makes sense. This guy's going to be asking for a government bailout by Christmas.
Why it couldn't have been his own? Is he the richest man in the world? It couldn't have been his own money somehow?
Yeah, somehow. I mean, his own. Look, I think it's great that the richest man in the world has a secret deep dream to be like Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan's great. That's great. But when your whole goal as a philanthropist is to be Lord of the Dude Bros, you could aim a little higher, JP Morgan. Just saying. So go ahead. Is
Joe Rogan great anymore? I mean, I feel like I did his show in 2019, so it was just before the pandemic. And I think that once he came out as anti-vax, I feel like, to me, I'm pretty much free speech, and you're going to live and die by the things you say. But I feel like that one's one where that was dangerous. That got people killed. I feel like the questioning of
But if with all due respect to Joe Rogan, who's still a great comic, if he was out there saying, "Hey, let's look out for each other. Let's wear a mask. Let's have social distancing," none of that's going to get rid of the virus. It's just harm reduction, because we want to be good patriots and look out for each other. A lot of straight white dudes wouldn't listen to his show anymore.
It's
dude bro culture, and empathy is kryptonite.
Empathy is crippling?
It's kryptonite, and it's weakness. Caring about actual patriotism, actual values. I mean, it's just like we were losing 3,000 Americans a day, and that doesn't happen anymore. And that's because of the damn vaccine. But we're dealing with a culture that says Donald Trump built this vaccine with his own hands to save all those lives, and no way am I taking that goddamn vaccine. That's Yeah. I'm just a Fellini film our country's turned into, Pete. I'm just
it really is bizarre. What do you make of RFK? Would you have him on your show?
I had him on my show. He's great. You've had him on your show, haven't you?
No, I've never met the guy. No, never.
I got done TV with him. I was a big fan of Ring of Fire Radio. He did with Mike Papantonio.
Yeah.
I have him on again on my show in a second. I'm looking forward to the nonfiction version of his campaign speech. The fact is that what's worse, if Robert Kennedy knows he's every Nazi's favorite Democrat, or if he doesn't? Which one's worse at this point? I mean, does he get the Mike Flynn and the Steve Bannon and cheering him on? Does that at all weigh upon his soul, or does he not? I mean, all I know is, how will this affect Cheryl Hines' career? That's really all I think about all day long.
Yeah, crazy. It's
how will Hollywood punish her? I mean, look, it's complete batshit, and it's heartbreaking, because he's someone who I've admired a great deal, and someone who I've respect on many levels in many ways. But I mean, people are like, is he going to be able to win a primary? He's not going to be able to win the Kennedy family. So this is just strictly, a hatchet job by the right, because old Sleepy Joe is getting shit done, and they're not challenging him. He's not going to have a primary challenge.
What do you get concerned about those third party runs? I
do. I'm more concerned about Cornel West, who I respect very deeply, who started off being part of the People's Party, and it was kind of a joke. Now Jill Stein is managing him. I think it's a great time for men who don't have uteruses to reach out for third parties. I think men who will never have to be pregnant should embrace voting third party in swing states. Look how far it's gotten us in the last couple of years. So yeah, guys, if you don't have a uterus and you don't much really respect the lives and, body autonomy of people who do, go ahead, vote third party. And I love third party, Pete. Our first third party president got in there with 38% of the vote, and he was a Republican, and it was Lincoln. And I'm a big believer in third parties. And I'm not one of these people who still believes it's 2000 and we only have one party. I voted for Nader a couple times. I voted for Nader in safe blue states. I would not vote for Ralph Nader I don't blame Ralph Nader for Bush. I blame 90,000 people in Florida who knew they were in a battleground state and went with Bush anyway. I went with Nader anyway. So it's really sad to see people I've admired for a long time sort of become staked by malevolent entities to try to derail the democratic process.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to go far, but Cornel West could really hurt. But it's the same thing. It's getting the Hillary fans versus the Bernie fans and stoking the divisions in the party, which is partially how Vladimir Putin got elected president of the United States in the first place. Remember blacks against Hillary? That was Putin. So this is all part of Vladimir Putin's quest to return to the White House. I think Vladimir Putin's the worst president we've had since Dick Cheney.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I think, what do you think about how President Biden has done?
I never knew how ageism is the one ism that liberals and conservatives do equally, right? Yeah. I got nothing against the president who's 80. Paul McCartney's 80, and Martin Scorsese's 80, and Carole King is 80, and any of them could be president right now. All right. I'd vote for any of them. I don't really mind a president who needs a nap. I mind a president who needs more defense attorneys. Biden at age 80 has gotten this infrastructure plan that is only going to start showing its ripple effects around the country over the next year. Yeah. The CHIPS Act, bringing technology manufacturing back to America in ways I thought Democrats had given up on. The PACT Act, for those who actually care about the vets. We got to the lowest level of childhood poverty in the history of this country in 2021, proving that we can do that if we as a country decide that's our priority. This guy gets a lot done in a day, Pete. I mean, I want to elect a 100-year-old guy and see how much that guy can get done in a day.
Yeah.
He's like a lesbian Scientologist, Pete. He gets shit done. I got to say, I kind of like having a president who I know is not thinking about his mistress or his next job. That part I approve of. I was never a big fan of Joe Biden, but old Joe, he's decriminalizing weed. Holy shit. I'm here for it. Great. Show me more. He's freaking out all the right billionaires. And that at the end of the day is what keeps encouraging me about Joe Biden.
Many on the left have been critical of his support for the war in Ukraine. I'm not one of them. I think this is a war of aggression by Russia. I followed and covered the Ukrainian revolution in 2014. I was so inspired by those young people and what they did to get rid of Putin's puppet at the time. And it was amazing. And I don't think we'd ever seen that kind of revolution be successful in our lifetime. I followed the situation ever since. And an unprovoked aggressor in Russia reminds me a lot of us in Iraq. This is obviously different and so much worse, I think. But still, I support Biden and NATO in this. And I find myself a little uncomfortable because I've always been pretty anti-war. But I see this as a real major threat to those people and the region. I
think you're fine with that. If you're anti-war, then you want Putin to stop it.
Right.
If you're anti-war, you want Putin to end it. Okay? If you're anti-war, you want those troops to leave that have been raping and murdering to leave the country. That's what anti-war looks like. That the war started only by Putin, not by NATO, not by Joe Biden. And I'm not saying NATO and Joe Biden and the White House and the U.S. foreign policy hasn't given the Russian czars a lot to fret about over the years. No one's hands are clean here. But we're seeing this really weird phenomena where our friends on the extreme right and the extreme left are meeting and copulating and making this all about Biden's war of aggression, that Biden's a warmonger. Every day, they won't even call Putin a warmonger, and Putin's the one who I do believe mongered the fuck out of this war in the first place. So it's... And you'll see the right-wing trolls who say, oh, you're liberals. You used to be anti-war, but now you're all about the military-industrial complex. You used to be anti-war. And I'm like, no, excuse me, Mr. Motherfucker. The liberals have always been consistent. I wish, Pete Dominic, I wish that we had seen a global coalition arise against our war of needless aggression back in 2003. I wish we had seen a coalition rise up like Joe Biden has assembled against Vladimir Putin doing the same damn thing. If you were against an imperialist war of a country invading a smaller country that had never attacked it then you're against the same thing right now. The liberals aren't the hypocrites. It's the people who cheered on Bush back then who are pretending to be anti-war now, when in reality, and you know this, they're just cheering on Putin. And it's fun to ask them on social media and see how hard it is for some of them to criticize Putin. It's rather remarkable.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on why that is. Why do you think many in America, and certainly in the Republican Party, who have always been anti-Russia and Russia hawks, why are they now supporting Vladimir Putin? What do you make of that?
Because they've always been authoritarian. And 30 years ago, when they were being authoritarian towards Russia, it was Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin who were de-escalating the authoritarianism. Now Russia has another authoritarian thug running it, and the people who love Dick Cheney, who love Donald Trump, love Putin. It's weakness in men, Pete. It's weak, low wattage men who find brutality to be masculine. And that's what drives it all. Men who are terrified of their dick size, men who haven't seen their dick in many years, men who have never learned how to pleasure a woman because they don't have the self-esteem to ask a woman what they're doing wrong.
Now, take it down a notch. I'm two
men who admire military strongmen.
I'm 2 or 3 of those, buddy. Take it down a notch.
Right on. All right. Listen, but it's true, Pete.
I think even more specifically, I don't know that everybody necessarily knows this, but he's very He's very all that pro-masculine stuff that you just listed up, but he's anti-gay too, and I think a lot of people like that. He's authoritarian, and he's very, quote, masculine, but also very anti-gay. And
he's also fake Christian, and that's what matters most to the Republicans. Russia was always, the Soviet Union was an atheist empire. He's been all about the old-time religion, having the patriarch of the Russian church bless his evil war of rape and pillage on Ukraine. Fake Christianity coupled with real homophobia is very attractive to right-wing people who don't actually read the Bible. They just like to wave it around as a prop to prove they're better than you. It's the same people who liked the fake, revoltingly false Christianity and violence of the George Bush administration and the Donald Trump administration go for this. And I don't think Putin's a capitalist either. I think Putin's just a straight up gangster.
Yeah, he's just a mafia
nation that has no real, and he's hurting his own people so much. Look, I'm like you. I'm waiting to see how long until Putin gets Putined. When is Putin going to throw Putin out of a 14th story window or serve Putin a polonium smoothie? That seems to be the way, these Russians, I love Russian people. I love Russian culture. They do love their czars. They love having these strongmen who rule for many, many years, whatever they call them. They like their czar.
A lot of Americans do too, apparently.
Yeah, but they know how to overthrow them in Russia. And they almost got rid of Yeltsin 30 years ago. They weren't really trying to get rid of Putin 2 weeks ago, but it's amazing to see. It's 500 days now since this horrible war started. And at this point, it's one of the reasons why you can't go on Twitter, because it's everyone calling Ukraine Nazis. Because, Pete, the Nazis are known for electing Jewish presidents and then having larger countries invade them. That's what the Nazis did. They elected their Jewish president democratically, and then a bigger country invaded them, and they were trying to defend themselves. Nazis all the way.
I feel like it was your Twitter feed I was just looking at, preparing to talk to you about. Like, the truth is the American Nazis, for which there are far too many, are those who identify with a lot of fascism. They all support Vladimir Putin. They don't support, they overwhelmingly do.
Of course, there's Nazis in Ukraine. There's Nazis in Russia. There's Nazis in Jersey. There's Nazis everywhere. And Nazis have always been extreme authoritarian right-wing nationalists.
Yeah.
Always. Always.
No one has been better than you for our entire careers when it comes to the issues of religion and pointing out the hypocrisy and the contradictions of the American religious right. You're so good at it. But I wonder...
And from all the good shows for that. It's really, it's been great.
My big Fugelsang question is, are you surprised by where we're at in America? You've been talking about this, studying this, living this issue forever. We saw what seemed to be kind of a dwindling, and it depends on how you look at it. You could argue that in terms of numbers, it is, but the minority is in charge in so many states, and our country has really, there's been a real backlash against the progress, certainly when it comes to the LGBT community. Are you surprised that they have capitalized, that they have used especially the trans issue to divide us, to get votes, to get ratings with so much success? Did you think that we would be here a few years ago? Did you see this coming?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. No. Racism, divide and conquer has always worked. I mean, Heather McGhee wrote a great book 2 years ago about how they used racism to break up the unions. You want a black man being paid the same as you? Really? And it works. And of course, it's always been the Christians throughout our country's history. It's always been right-wing Christians who don't really focus much on the teachings of the guy their religion is named after, but will tell you who the existential threat is. There's always, it's the Irish, or it's the Italians, it's the blacks. 20 years ago, Pete, it was nothing but the Muslims. Nothing but the Muslims. And then about 15 years ago, it was nothing but the gays who wanted to get married and undermine traditional marriage and destroy traditional marriage. It was the illegals for a while, the illegals, the refugees. Illegals is what we call the Christian refugees at our southern border. Now it's transgender children and trans soldiers who want to serve this country. Fascism 101 is you find a powerless minority. You convince the majority that their way of life is under threat by this powerless minority, and then you convince them that only I can protect you from this creeping existential threat, whether it's Muslims, whether it's immigrants, whether it's gay kids. So I'm not surprised at all. This is how fascism always operates. This is how conservative media already operates. I promise you, in 10 years, they will have moved on to another boogeyman. And in 20 years, conservatives will be claiming they were pioneers on transgender rights. Mitt Romney's going to claim he was for gay marriage before he leaves public office. I swear to God, he's going to do it. I can't see it. Do you think it's almost like we're not even talking about marriage equality as much, and we're not maybe as worried about it, but it's certainly possible the Supreme Court could overturn that. And a lot of people think that will happen. I mean, this court they could overturn it next year if they wanted to. And this Supreme Court, this 6-judge majority, we have to remember, of the 6 judges, 5 of them were appointed by presidents the majority of American citizens voted against.
Always a great point.
The majority of Americans said no to George Bush. The majority of Americans voted for Al Gore. If the majority said no to Trump, the majority voted for Hillary Clinton. If we were a democracy, those 5 people wouldn't be on this court. And the 6th one, Clarence Thomas, well, shucks, he was appointed by a president who opposed the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So these people don't speak for the majority of presidents. And when people call the Supreme Court illegitimate, it's not because of their conservative rulings. It's because at least 3 of them have been caught in flagrant bribery scandals. At least 4 of them publicly put their hands on a Bible and perjured themselves under oath in their confirmation hearings. And we know this. So, and Gorsuch is in a stolen seat. Gorsuch is completely illegitimate because only the black president couldn't get an up or down vote on his duly appointed nominee.
Right.
So this court is completely fakakta. When FDR tried to appoint new judges, he did it to scare down the Supreme Court. They were gutting the New Deal. He said, I'm going to add more judges. The 3-judge triad on the court that was gutting the New Deal, one of them backed down and the New Deal was saved. He never actually tried to appoint them. It was a negotiating tactic, which is why a lot of people are frustrated when they hear Joe Biden say, not going to consider that.
You think that, well, I mean, even if he did consider it, I feel like you would need a filibuster-proof majority to be able to get it done. So even more of an obstacle than a Democratic president not wanting to do it would be with U.S. Senate.
Of course, but I feel like I do genuinely think that this particular White House needs to get people inspired and riled up. I think people want to see the president fighting for them. And this media culture we have is not going to be talking about Biden's accomplishments because the media culture needs a horse race. This media is going to be so biased in favor of whoever the Republican nominee is until about late September of 2024, when they'll go all Biden at the very end.
Yeah, I was reading the great Margaret Sullivan, former public editor of the Times or the Post. I think maybe the Post. She's writing about how a lot of the mainstream media, corporate media, she called out several different outlets, but ABC News most recently, framing things to make them seem, quote, more normal. And there's a big article that got a lot of attention and criticism by ABC News last week about the Moms for Liberty. And just the way that they talked about them was that these were, they were worried about parental rights and they were worried about pornography in school and so on, but they weren't really. It was a terrible piece. It was terribly framed. It wasn't accurate about who these people were and what they want. And I don't know how closely you've been paying attention to the fight for our schools. I've been in it here. I think we might have talked about this in the past, but how much do you think about both the media's framing of it and those organizations like Moms for Liberty who are trying to take over our kids' schools and are in many states?
Well, this is a 100-year quest to destroy the public school system in New York City. I mean, you want to make a conservative really angry? I've done this many times in interviews. Ask them this question. Doesn't America deserve to have the best public school system on earth? That makes them so mad. Because when you frame it as a patriotic issue, they don't like it. Right. They want to gut public schools. And you know why? They don't want, because a free thinker is Satan's slave. They don't want women being educated.
Well, there's and they want the money. They want to privatize it so they can
privatize it, make a buck off it. And I'm not against charter schools per se, but Moms for Liberty is an AstroTurf parents' rights movement. They are very well funded. They are very well occupied. But again, it's more fascism. I mean, they are not concerned apolitical mothers. They're a dark money AstroTurf op that's run by seasoned political operatives to gut public education in the United States. They are in league with the Proud Boys. One chapter just quoted Hitler. They are banning books, but using the word liberty. They're sort of like a Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum from the 70s, but on steroids. And they're always going to say, we're doing this just to protect children, just to protect children. But the reality is they're there to create chaos with a lot of fake moral outrage to undermine public schools. They're not fighting for what teachers are saying they need. Right. They're fighting to impose a narrow, anti-woman, fake Christian, conservative, authoritarian agenda on schools.
Is the Christian right influential in New York City and other cities' public schools? I feel like I haven't heard that as much. Like it's more of a suburb thing, but
I mean, the Christian right's everywhere.
Yeah,
we all grew up in it. It's part of the culture that we all came of age in, and that framed religion itself in this country. Pete, the Bible's not against abortion. The Bible never comes out against abortion. Jesus never mentions abortion. Judaism never bans abortion. They're free and legal in Israel. When I say that, people are shocked because we've all grown up in a society where being Christian means you try to ban abortion. Like we are all colonized with this right-wing Jesus mentality where they sold us this authoritarian, gun-loving, gay-hating, abortion-hating Jesus and not the radical reformer, the peaceful revolutionary who uplifted the marginalized and fought against the powerful. The actual Jesus terrifies the power structure that has historically used Jesus to keep poor people in line. So, none of it surprises me at all. This has always been the game plan. And this is why, even if you don't believe in the Bible talk, it behooves progressives or moderates or anti-evil people or leftists to just be familiar enough with it. Because I can guarantee you the Trumper at your table has never read the New Testament. Yeah. And to me, this is about taking away camouflage. They have a mean agenda. They want to dress it up in religious liberty, right? But for them, liberty means the liberty to pretend Jesus hates the same minorities I hate. They're not interested in liberty at all. They voted for the guy who promised to ban one religion from entering the country. So they haven't read the Bible. They've created Jesus in their own image. And all I try to do with my humble little jokes and references is take away their camouflage and say, no, you're just mean. You have no spiritual sanction to be cruel to trans children. And if you want to sit here and talk about genital mutilation, motherfucker, let's begin with circumcision, Reverend.
Hey,
there we
how
go.
dare you come for circumcision?
Cut close to home, Pete. Sorry. Yeah, I understand. Just saying when it's stuff you don't like, it's a freak. When it's stuff you do like, it's religion.
That reminds me, I have to do my circumcision live read, if you could just stand by.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who's your moil? You have a lot of great sponsors.
Folks, starting the live read for circumcision. Folks, have you ever thought,
Welcome to Anteater No More.
When you look at what is happening
it's going really well, and then I got preachy, Pete Dominic. It started off okay, and then I got all on the tabernacle.
I want you there. I like you. I like you on the tabernacle. I think that's where you shine, where you are best. I miss hearing these talks and these rants. I think they've always been super effective, and I think that so many people who do identify with the Jesus that you describe and the Christianity that you describe and grew up following, like, they love it.
Thank you. And I don't claim to be a good Christian either. Not at all. I just know the Bible really well. And Jesus teaches us to call out pious, fake hypocrites. Look, if you believe in the character of Jesus in the Bible, he commands you to welcome the stranger in Matthew 25, individuals and nations. He says individuals and nations will be judged by how they welcome the stranger, how they take care of the sick, how they take care of the poor, how they take care of those in prison. Jesus gives his marching orders to individuals and nations. It is not possible to support them. And here's a question you ask your loved ones. Tell me one teaching of Jesus the Republican Party's fought for in the last 30 years. And you'll find out how much your loved ones haven't read this book they claim makes them better than you.
I can't believe I've never really thought about asking that question, but I'm sure they would come up with something that they thought Jesus taught.
Number one, they'll say abortion. And then you tell them abortion's not in the Bible, and they'll say, well, thou shalt not kill. And then you say, that's in Exodus. And in Exodus, God makes it clear that a fetus is property, and a woman's life has more value in his eye than a fetus. They haven't read the Bible, Pete. Number two thing they'll say is strong border. Strong border. And I'll say, okay, there are no laws in the Bible about borders or immigration. The only law in the entire Bible in the Old and New Testament is welcome the stranger. And then the third thing they'll say is, Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. And that's when you have to politely say, at no point in the Bible does Jesus ever express a preference where the American embassy in Jerusalem should be 2002.
Well, he was American. Oh, wait. Is that Mormons that think Jesus was born in America or something like that?
He came over here for a while, yeah. I'll tell you, though, what hurt this country more than anything? Blonde, blue-eyed Jesus in Bibles in the 1800s.
Yeah.
That fucked this country up for a century at least.
Yeah. The beautiful Jesus, but it's not what Jesus apparently looked like. Yeah. I'm the
blonde kid from the Middle East. Yeah.
What do you think of like what's happening right now with the presidential, like with DeSantis versus Trump, and what's gone wrong there? I mean, a lot of people, and I think this is pretty accurate, conventional wisdom, it would seem at this point, say that Ron DeSantis was just trying to out Trump. He's trying to be meaner than Trump, a bigger jerk than Trump. It's not worked. It's backfired. I read today that he's down to Trump in one poll by 20 points in Florida with Florida Republicans, where you'd think DeSantis would be pretty popular.
What do you mean? What's gone wrong, Pete? What's you said? What's gone wrong here?
Why can't Ron DeSantis get any traction?
Oh, okay. Well, because for the same reason Chris Christie couldn't. I had Chris Christie on my show.
You did?
Yeah.
I did. My God. What did Frank Conniff say? Oh, it was that time, wasn't it?
It was that time. Yeah.
Frank got fired over it. Oh, you love him.
Yeah, but I said to, Christie said on my
Frank
show.
Frank said, why is this piece of shit coming up here? And the executives rightly, I even told Frank, who I love him, like, you can't, it's not your company. You can't say that about a guy coming. Anyway, we won't relitigate that.
I love Frank. I begged Frank. I begged him in advance. I said, there's a logo in that. I love Frank. He's a genius. And I will work with him in any capacity I ever can. But but Chris Christie said, Trump did what I was going to do. I was going to be the bull in the china shop.
Yeah.
All Christie can do is be a spoiler because these Philistines are never going to go for him.
He's been great.
He's
never been better.
It's the presidential loser industrial complex, as our friend Tina Dupuis calls these things.
Yeah.
Most of these people are there for higher public speaking fees or to get a media deal, right? Rick Santorum got to be on CNN for 5 years because he lost enough primaries. So Christie is there, and I'm glad he's running. He's going to be incredibly entertaining because he's going to do to Ron DeSantis what he did to Marco Rubio. He is going to just flay him and use his bones as a toothpick on camera. Chris Christie is going to demolish him with all the hatred in his bacon-encrusted heart. Donald Trump is going to probably avoid these because why shouldn't he? Yeah. Right? Like, if Joe Biden shouldn't debate Robert Kennedy, why is Trump going to show up and debate these single-digit people? Asa Hutchinson, it's going to be a lot. Asa fifth placer, right? Like Mike Pence in that eternal battle with, Pence is never going to come even close to getting none of the above kind of numbers in this. It's just Trump. It's only Trump. And it's DeSantis who is too dumb to step back and wait till 2028 when he could glide to it. Yeah. To your question, it's performative cruelty. I mean, what has Ron DeSantis done that's made life better for anybody? He's shown off for people who watch Newsmax. Yeah. Don't say gay is a monstrous policy that allows any Yahoo to sue any teacher or any school if they say something said Yahoo doesn't like. Right. Technically, you could sue somebody for talking about heterosexual relationships under the language of that law. Stop woke law, this woke thing. Again, this whole culture of let's never complain about racism. Let's just complain about protests against racism, which is Trumpism all the way. Except that it didn't really work that well in 2018 or 2020 or 2022. Beating up on trans kids doesn't test that well outside the bubble. Right. What these Republicans, our brothers and sisters in the GOP, don't realize is they keep running to win a Republican nomination for something, and they never seem to realize there's a great, big, wide America of moderates, young people, and women. You've been insulting your entire primary race up to this point. So it's like, I had this happen on CNN when I was on CNN with the Mitt Romney and the Etch-a-Sketch trap. They try to reboot it, but they can't. DeSantis has already painted himself into too racist, too homophobic, too cruel a quarter, and his wife can't rescue him this time. Right, yeah. I was horrified of this guy all last year. I was so amazed at how mediocre he really was as a public speaker and as a debater. And honestly, this guy groveled before Donald Trump. Remember the ad where his wife stars talking about how Ron's got a mental disorder and he's just quoting MAGA and he's building a wall with blocks with his baby. Yep. He's prostituting his infant baby to say, we'll build a wall just like groveling, literally handing his manhood over to Trump with both hands. Yeah. And so, I understand why Trump would be disgusted in it. DeSantis is mean enough to win a fight in his own junior high. He's not going to go to the regionals.
I saw someone say this today, and I'm surprised I hadn't really thought about this. I guess because I just assumed that Donald Trump will win the Republican nomination. But if he didn't somehow, he would run as an independent, and he would still win more votes than the nominee, the Republican nominee. No, I think it's fair to say, right?
Maybe that happened in 1916. Teddy Roosevelt was 1912. Teddy Roosevelt had left office. Yeah, Rough Riders. He had gone off and done his adventures, and he was disgusted with his handpicked successor, William Howard Taft. He ran against the guy he picked to replace him, and he ran as a progressive with the Bull Moose Progressive Party, and he beat his Republican successor by 1 million votes. But he split the ticket, and racist Democrat Woodrow Wilson got in there, and we all know the rest of that story.
That's right. So, maybe we'll see that again.
Hey, we can only pray. But it's going to be amazing to see because Glenn Youngkin could be the sleeper here. Glenn Youngkin, I think, is the only one playing it smart, counting on DeSantis to flame out. DeSantis has a lot of money. He's going to stay in this race till the end. But if it goes nowhere, and if Trump is indicted and suddenly, DeSantis is just so beaten up, there's no clear winner. If Trump has to drop out of the race, either because of legal reasons or, again, the epic damage done to his all too frail arteries, he's not a healthy man. Watch Glenn Youngkin swoop into this race last minute and try to snatch the nomination.
Well, either way, I hope we'll get to talk to you about it, John. I'll let you go, but I really love hearing your voice and talking to you, and it's always great, man. I'm sorry it's been so long since we talked.
I'm sorry I went on for so long, but you made me. It's so good to see you. You got me all riled up again.
Let's talk again soon, buddy. Thank you so much for joining me. This is awesome.
I want to tell everybody, if they don't have SiriusXM, and why would you? You can still hear a highlight version of our show on the John Fugelsang podcast every day.
Yeah, so I'll link to it as well.
I love your show. I love what you do. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure and an honor.
All right, there you have it. Fugelsang. Let him know you heard him here on today's episode, and it's always great to hear from John. We always had a great friendship, and I was happy to get him on and let him rip. Always fun. Let him know you heard him here on the show. Now, to get to my quick conversation with State Senator from Iowa, it's time for a talk with Zach Wahls about what the hell is happening in Iowa. The Des Moines Register last night. Iowa House lawmakers have passed a bill that would ban nearly all abortions after roughly 6 weeks of pregnancy, with the Senate vote set to follow Tuesday night. The 56-34 vote came in a marathon one-day special session that was punctuated by protesters' angry shouts in the Iowa Capitol and hours of emotional testimony from supporters and opponents. Here now just a brief clip of one of the women who, of course, is against the abortion ban and a heart-wrenching testimony of her own experience.
My name is Leah Vanden Bosch, and I'm heartbroken to be here today. I started sharing my abortion story more than 5 years ago, shortly after receiving care here in Des Moines. Anti-choice politicians in Iowa have inflicted an unspeakable amount of pain and trauma into my life, invading my privacy and inserting themselves into my medical history. I'm tired of being a political pawn with my mental health and reproductive decisions up for speculation and debate. I was born and raised in Iowa, and choosing to come back and live here in my adult life has been a dehumanizing experience. Abortion is normal, safe, life-saving health care.
Oh, tough to hear, but I think really important. Of course, the legislation would prohibit abortions after cardiac activity is detected in an embryo, which doctors say can happen as early as 6 weeks after a pregnant woman's last period. That marks a sharp deviation from Iowa's current law, which allows abortion up to 20 weeks after conception. None of this, of course, would be happening without the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. And yesterday, hundreds of protesters flooded the Capitol Rotunda, chanting for hours ahead of a rally for reproductive rights. Arguments broke out between supporters and opponents of the bill, becoming so heated at one point a state trooper had to break it all up. Well, I checked in right in the heat of it, in the middle of it, with Zach Wahls, who's the state senator there, who I've known for a really long time, and he has no F's to give. A powerful 10 minutes with Zach Wahls right there in the middle of the Iowa Capitol yesterday.
Hey Pete, how you doing?
Good to see you.
I can only barely hear you. We're at the Iowa State House, where we literally just finished a rally to protect reproductive freedom here in Des Moines, and so it's still a little loud in here, but I'll try to get somewhere a little bit more quiet here in a second.
Yeah,
can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine, and if you can hear me, my main question is, do you have
I can hear you enough. I should have, if I was smarter, I would have brought my AirPods with me, but you don't have to be that smart to be elected to the Iowa Senate.
Zach, thank you. It's great to see you. You look great.
Good to be with you, Pete.
All right, so let's get started. What is the timeline right now? How likely is this going to happen? By the time I post this for everybody to listen, is it going to be a done deal?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Republicans have the votes to pass this ban, which is why they've called a special session. It's a long story, but essentially what's happened is that for several years, Republicans in Iowa have been attempting to ban abortion in our state. There were a series of legal challenges that played out through our state Supreme Court that resolved a little bit last month. And now, ironically, the governor called for the special session the day after the 4th of July, the day that we all spent celebrating freedom and independence. The very next day, Republicans called for the special session to ban abortion effectively in the state of Iowa. It's a 6-week abortion ban that would ban 98% or more of all abortions that happen in the state of Iowa. And this is all a direct result of the United States Supreme Court's decision overturning Roe versus Wade last year. And that's where we are today.
I hear the activists there in the background, and we support everybody that's there. What are they asking for? What can be done? What is the situation in the State House? How do you ever get the votes to change anything?
Well, I mean, the turnout for today has been absolutely incredible. You know, when I got here, I wasn't sure, are we going to see half and half, you know, pro-choice, anti-choice, what's that going to look like? Instead, it's been overwhelmingly, 95% plus freedom-loving Iowans who want to protect the ability of Iowa women to make their own healthcare decisions without the government stepping in. It's been incredible to see the response from people all over the state coming to Des Moines to make their voices heard. I mean, part of what's so messed up here, Pete, is the fact that Republicans introduced this legislation late last Friday. We started to see the actual language come out. But Republicans, who felt so strongly that this bill had to be passed into law, that they needed the special session, they couldn't wait until next year. But then the moment we got here, the very first motion that they passed was to limit debate and prevent people from actually being able to speak and make their voices heard. It's hypocrisy at the absolute worst. And I think the booing you're hearing behind me is some of the folks here who are rallying for reproductive rights. I found some of the Republican leaders in the other chamber, and they're letting them know what they think about their plans.
Zach, how does this issue poll in the state of Iowa? Is this about gerrymandered districts? Is this about there's more Republicans than Democrats, and without more votes, you can't change it, but yet the polling would say what?
Well, so I wouldn't say it's about gerrymandered districts. Iowa doesn't have a perfect process, but we do have a pretty good redistricting process. The polling's there's a poll earlier this year that showed 61% of Iowans supported keeping abortion legal in most or all cases. That's a pretty strong number, over 60%. I think people think of Iowa as being a very Republican state at this point, but the reality is that, like a lot of Midwestern states, there's still a very strong, understanding that we're not going to see every issue eye to eye, and that's okay. Now, I think the reason this is happening is that you have a Republican Party that has been very effectively captured by a very far-right base. Republican Governor Kim Reynolds has been primarying more moderate Republicans in her own party, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars from outside special interest groups, mostly in Washington, D.C. You're seeing it on abortion. You've seen it on other issues like public education. The governor has been pushing a private school voucher scheme for years. That finally became law earlier this year after they primaried several moderate Republicans who knew that private school vouchers were bad for their rural public schools. And so, unfortunately, it's just this continuing trend of the Republican Party becoming more and more extreme.
Kim Reynolds convened the special session. What if there was a Democrat that was the governor of Iowa? When can that happen, and would it happen?
So in Iowa, you can have a special session either one of two ways. Either the governor can call it, or you get 2/3 of each chamber signs on in support of it. We obviously, as Democrats, did not support it in the House or the Senate. This was the governor calling the special session on her own.
How do you get rid of that governor?
Well, in 2026, Kim Reynolds will be on the ballot. We had obviously a tough electoral cycle here, this last one in 2022. But we'll hopefully have the opportunity to elect a new Democratic governor in 2026 and get Iowa back on track.
Is it fair to say that we're consigned to the fact that this 6-week ban is going to go into effect and women in Iowa will be living with that reality starting today?
Yeah, in fact, we're actually hearing that some providers have already, before this bill has even become law, out of fear of potential retaliation, stopped performing abortion care in our state. And so, these are somewhat unconfirmed reports, but that is something that we are hearing. And it just illustrates the effect that this introducing this bill is having on people across the state. And the concern that we have is that, obviously this is going to immediately affect Iowa women, their families, people who are going to be directly affected by this. But we know the effect is going to have ripple effects, because this is going to result in people leaving our state. This is going to result in providers choosing states other than Iowa. It's going to be very difficult for our state's OBGYN programs. There are going to be catastrophic effects of this that will ripple far beyond what happens here today.
What else does this mean for women and girls and families in Iowa, Zach?
Well, look, I think it shows that there's a fundamental lack of trust, right? What this is saying, what Republicans are saying is, we're going to use the power of state government to tell you what you can and cannot do. And by the way, Pete, I should tell you, there is no exception in this bill for age. If you're a 12-year-old girl and, and by the way, there's a quote-unquote rape exception, but that's only valid if you report the rape to law enforcement within 45 days of the alleged incident, which is absolutely preposterous, because we know that, there are a huge number of sexual assault cases that never get reported for reasons that are, complicated and personal and private for each individual person. And this is ultimately saying that, if you're a 12-year-old who has been raped by your uncle, if you don't report that to law enforcement, you can't have an abortion. And the fact that there's no age limit, now we're going to introduce amendments to try to change that, but we certainly don't expect Republicans to accept any of our amendments, including what I would say are very common sense things that you should be able to get some level of compromise on. I don't think it's going to happen.
I'm glad that you're a senator there. I'm glad that you're still there fighting. I appreciate you talking to me today. A lot of people listening, everybody listening, including lots of people in Iowa that you and I both know, want to know what we can do.
Well, so right now, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Threads, I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, TikTok. We're sharing what's happening here. For folks who are listening, who are in Iowa, who aren't here yet, get your tail down to the State House, make your voice heard. But then after today, we know that Republicans have the votes to pass this. The most important thing that people can do is get organized locally, whether it's with your local Democratic Party, a local affinity group, or a local chapter of a group of advocates or advocacy. That's how we're going to ultimately fix this. It's going to be through the courts, and it's going to be through getting organized in 2024, and then again in 2026 when we're going to have the chance to elect a new governor.
Zach, thanks a lot for talking to me. Are you on MySpace still?
I am not on.
Oh, damn it.
I never had a MySpace. I had a Zenga a very long time ago.
You are a very young man. I can see why that would be. But you're doing great work, and you keep it up, and it's great to see your face and talk to you, and you got our support, and reach out anytime, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, bud. Later.
All right, there he goes, Zach Wahls, and you can find him in all the social media. The links are in today's show notes, so go say hi to him, thank him for joining me, and support all of our friends in Iowa as they wade into this new America that so many of us are having to live in, where women's reproductive rights and health care is being curtailed in draconian ways. It is sad, but we will fight. We will fight. Wherever they are, we will fight. That is my version of Churchill on the enemy that is the anti-women's reproductive rights, anti-women's health care. Come on. I mean, just so terrible. So glad that there's people like Zach and so many other amazing people that we know, Kim and Mark and others in Iowa. We love you guys, and we're thinking of you, and thinking of your future and how you're going to deal with it. We'll be here to talk about it all, except this Thursday again. Reminder, we will not be doing the Hangout Thursday. It'll be on Friday night because I have a speaking gig on Thursday. Friday night, 8 p.m. If you're a subscriber, you will get a link, and I hope to see you there. As always, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks so much again to John Fugelsang, Zach Wahls, and all of you, because I can't do the show without your support. Go give a review, a rating on Spotify and Apple. I hope you're okay wherever you are, wherever the weather has been very extreme and scary and tough, but we're thinking of each other, and I hope to see you at our Hangout, and keep building this community so that we have more folks to connect with, rely on, the way that Matty Carlson is traveling all over the country, meeting so many listeners with he's playing with his solo performance. It's been really, really cool to see. All right, that's it. That's all. John Carroll, sing us out as you do every day. Buy the song on johncarroll.org.
Stand our ground, and then stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. leave the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.